yesterday. A wandering mare's found a better way. For just as night seems most dark, the sunrise comes to warm our hearts.
From the ashes of war, through the blood and the gore, a man who once more than this world that is torn. A group that cannot just be stopped or forgot will rise to overcome all odds. And with every new day, through the parts that we play, as we push fear away and remember the ways of a man who was kind and whose words will remind. Do better.
Chapter 8. Coping Mechanism. A real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. Walter Winchell. The tension was worse than waiting for the raider leader to come through the doorway to us. Every pony was staring at me and stunned by my reaction. I pointed my shotgun to Alguacil first, then to Naeruiih, and then finally at Corners. My seething rage demanded some sort of penance. My tail came up to take the trigger from my mouth so I could speak.
But he died already! I'm sure he wouldn't want us killing or hurting the ponies he died for! Back off!
My voice was a shrill of shouts and veiled threats at my friends.
You're threatening your friends.
Pig was in the right side of my view, trying to push me to calm down.
They aren't my friends if they aren't willing to back down. I don't care what this unicorn has done. He clearly deserves another chance.
Pinky started to make an argument, stopped herself, and went back to munching on popcorn. Alguacil uncocked his magnum, and Corners retracted her machine gun barrels. I let out 2 huffs and then a snort to drive some of my own anger out. My tail, however, kept the shotgun at the ready, still pointing at Corners.
He deserves another chance.
I grumbled as my legs started to get weak again. I could see the shaking in the shotgun now. How much I was barely holding on to my feelings. Moments from becoming a burst of death.
Chifundo, take off his inhibiting ring.
Naeruiih gave me an indignant snort and stomped away, his hoofs leaving deep prints into the dirt that wouldn't just be blown away by the wind.
I'm going to cook dinner. If this comes back to bite us, I'm holding Sunrise responsible.
Alguacil pushed my shotgun down so it was pointed harmlessly at the ground.
Calm down, Sunrise. No sense in getting so hasty on your friends.
Yeah, because pointing a firearm at my friends was just getting hasty with them.
I passed my shotgun to my tail entirely, removing my hoof from the pump action. There was a smooth leather-on-metal sound as it slid into the holster on my saddlebags. I stepped off of the black unicorn only when I was certain no one was going to harm him.
Colt Chaser, it's okay. We're not gonna hurt you.
He gave me a baffled look for the words.
I'm Mauve. Who's Colt Chaser?
He asked, rather puzzled.
It was the name on your pip buck. Do you remember how you got it?
I leaned in, so my head was next to his. I wanted to see what he had to say about it as Chifundo used the release key on his horn and removed his inhibitor ring. He too walked up afterward, and I laid back onto the dirt next to the black stallion.
Great. You just alienated your friends, too. Congrats on that one. These farm ponies had better be worth it.
Alguacil stood there as Corners led the freed slaves over to the campfire. There was a faint stench in the air, and I could hear Chifundo talking to some pony. But the words were far enough away to be indistinct. Alguacil kept shifting his eye towards me, and Corners' eye slit. never left my returning stare.
Sunrise?
Alcosil started, but stopped immediately as my eyes shot to him. I removed the stare once I was satisfied he would stop. I lay there against Mauve, trying to comfort him, or seek some solace dealing with the events of the evening. Then I heard Mauve's deeper, yet softer unicorn voice ask,
What's that smell? That isn't the zebra's cooking, is it?
The tremble in his voice was still raw, unadulterated fear. There was a calming down happening slowly. Alcosil approached, as quiet as possible. I noticed him, but Mauve either didn't, or didn't want to look at the scary regulator.
No, I set the raider bodies to burning after I took their ears.
Alcosil interrupted, placing a talon tightly onto Mauve's spine, making the unicorn flinch and try to shift away in protest. The griffin was having none of it, and put his weight onto him to hold the pony down.
If I ever catch you helping raiders, slavers, bandits, or any creature doing anything like this again, I don't care what Sunrise says. I'm taking your ears and putting you on the pyre as well. Do I make myself clear?
Alcosil moved down to head level with Mauve. His eye socket was directly in Mauve's face, staring at him eye to eye and giving him that terrifying griffin glare. The one I feared to have him give me.
Yes, sir. I won't be. Never again.
Mauve's teeth chattered through the entire experience, but it was clear he got the message.
Sunrise, come on. Let's get you two over to where the food is. Crying and not eating isn't gonna make this better.
Alcosil extended a talon to help me up.
No, Mauve, go over with the others. Alguacil, show me Buddy's grave.
I demanded, looking up at him with pure determination in my eyes.
I want you away from Mauve right now, and I want to see Buddy.
He didn't say anything. He just started walking behind the farmhouse, and I followed. There, behind the grenade-damaged home, were 6 graves. All had been dug recently.
6? I thought there were only 2 dead in the barn. Where did the other 4 come from?
My head was running through the events when I saw Buddy's hat pinned down by a rock. My mind blanked out completely. Any thought I had was just gone. All I could do was walk up to it and lay down, sobbing against the hat as I looked at the larger grave. Tears rolling down my cheeks in streams, splattering against the churned earth of his final resting place. My heart wrenched with remorse, and my stomach twisted with failure upon seeing each one of the pellet marks that had penetrated his hat. I could see it also clearly in my mind. Him ripping and tearing with his claws at the raider, forcing the mad mare back. Then he missed one punch. The one attack that would have made the difference. That was long enough for the caravan gun to be leveled at him. The unicorn taking aim at his head and her magic pulling both triggers in a split second. He never knew what hit him. Body's head simply disintegrated into a red, white, and pink pulp. I wanted to rush forward to put my flank between Buddy and the blast. I wanted to stop it. I wanted to get Buddy to buy a helmet and armor him up like he did for me. All that was in my head. The what-ifs and couldn't I have done's. None of it was real. And that made it hurt all the more. I screamed out a cry of agony, rage, and despair. I had so few friends in my life. So very few. Now, I had one less. Nothing could compare to the pain I felt right now. Nothing! 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 It was a combination of a dagger thrusting into my heart and twisted, mixed with a brass hoof to my head for every decision I could have made that might have stopped this. I wailed until my voice couldn't find the ability to anymore. I don't know how much time passed before I deteriorated into pathetic sobs. I had Buddy's hat gripped into my hooves, tugging at it over and over again. It was as if, to me, if I could just pull that hat from the rock, it would bring Buddy back to life. He would be back to calling me darling or little Philly and picking me up like a foal if I could just tug hard enough. I don't know how much time had passed before Chifundo approached me. Algazil was gone, and the pink-striped stallion placed a hoof on my shoulder.
Sunrise. He is at peace. It does not come with ease. He doesn't regret his pact. He knew he may not come back.
Chifundo soothed me. His hoof rubbed at my side, then softly stroked my mane. Trying to calm the sobbing, he moved to softly grip my hooves one at a time and slit them away from Buddy's hat. When I wouldn't budge, he softly rubbed from my knee to my frog to get me to release the death grip of my hooves. I could hear the sound myself. I hated the sound of my own sobbing, but it was all I could do.
I spoke to his spirit. Please trust me when I say it. He holds you fondly in his heart. He still hopes for you, is what he wishes to impart.
Chifundo intoned. I could feel his hoof stroking across my head down my mane. I looked over at him and shuddered when it looked like his shadow was moving on its own. Chifundo slipped away, but his face was bright and welcoming. I turned myself back to the series of dirt mounds. I tried to pull myself from the grave, only to slowly turn back towards Buddy's resting place. I looked up at Chifundo and remembered the cave.
You can talk with spirits, right?
Chifundo nodded softly.
I don't understand how. But one day, can you promise I'll hear it in Buddy's own words?
I doubted my mind was ready for such an experience yet, but Chifundo softly nodded and held me tight to his chest. For now, I would have to trust his words. Chifundo let go of me and pulled away reluctantly, but he moved like he sensed that I should be alone for a bit.
Come and join the rest of us when your heart is back in focus.
Chifundo gave me a squeeze and walked away towards where I could hear the campfire crackling behind me. I sniffed back the last few tears. A faint smile crossed my face as the scent of Naeruiih's cooking drifted over to my nose. Maybe it was the draining of sorrows, or just a long march, but the thought of food started to overtake every inch of my mind. Eventually, I dragged myself towards the cooking pit. The former captives were huddled together, away from our group. And the zebras were having an argument over what to do with them.
We should get them set up and help them start their lives over here.
Naeruiih tried to be the authority in the situation.
We could take them back, and the town could help them find a knack.
Chifundo shot back. I took in the surrounding buildings, at least what was left of them. My mind was piecing it all together as I poked corners, or rather her box.
Could you repair the buildings while I work on getting a proper fence in place around here? That way they can defend this place.
I pointed at pieces of fencing we had torn up, as well as a couple of places that may need to be reinforced. She turned around and looked at my tear-stained face. I, however, was glad to have anything to talk about other than buddy stuff, and just started to ramble away ideas.
We would have to give up the weapons we looted from the raiders as well. Is every pony okay with that?
I suggested, as I forced the grim business of death out of my mind. I needed a focus, and making sure these ponies would be okay was just that. I buried myself in working on solutions, mechanics, buildings, because anything was better than feeling the caked blood on my raw, wet face.
It's your fault.
I'm sure I could build it better and easier to fortify than what is there right now.
Cornish chimed in, and I could see the smug smile under the box.
I want to slap that metal box to see if it'll ring like a bell, you little brat. But we'll talk about that later when I'm not angry at myself. Don't think for 1 second that your old Yeller comment is going to get a free pass.
Time and place, Sunrise. Go on, get your idea out there.
Pink interrupted with a burst into my view from above, upside down in my vision, without anything holding her there.
Yep, totally crazy. Pink defies gravity now. All right, let me ask what they want to do, and we'll figure it out from there.
I stated, as I looked to see if they were all in agreement. There were nods all around from the rest of our party, and then I approached a huddling group of hungry, abused, and frightened ponies.
Calm down. We aren't going to hurt you. I promise.
First thing I had to say, to make sure they stayed calm and didn't run away.
Now, do all of you want to stay and make a life here? Or should we escort you back to Silverfang Shanty?
I put on the most reassuring smile I could muster, and prayed to the goddesses it worked. The little filly pulled back and looked scared of me, like she didn't believe what I was saying.
Your face is caked in the blood of your enemies, and you threw a grenade that demolished the inside of that farmhouse. Not to mention Mauve looks like a freight train hit him. You also had no issue pointing a shotgun at these ponies 2 moments ago, but sure, you can totally prove you aren't here to hurt any pony, right?
Mauve stepped forward. He held his head low and wouldn't look me in the eye at first. There was a tense silence between myself and the unicorn, while my friends were talking behind me. I tuned them out, putting all my energy towards Mauve.
You should have been there to help your friend.
Mauve's face reminded me of Buddy. His sacrifice. I wanted to strike him so badly, but it wouldn't prove anything.
I can't fix it. I can't use mechanics to put ponies back together. No. But I can at least make his sacrifice mean something. So either give me something useful, brain, or by Celestia's fucking hooves! Shut up!
I pressed the hoof up against Mauve's chin and lifted it so he would have to look at me with his charcoal eyes.
It's okay, Mauve.
I felt the tears in my eyes welling up, and my sobs had to be stifled immediately. Through choked words, I tried to clean his face, but I just smeared bits of dry blood on him.
I forgive you. You don't have to do that anymore. Tell me what you want us to do to help you.
He turned his head to the other ponies, and then back to me. For the first time, this stallion smiled. It was a nervous one, but he was at least smiling.
I think it would be best if we headed back with your group. This place has too much pain and suffering for us now.
He timidly rubbed at his left forehoof while he talked. My own hoof wasn't applying that much pressure, but it was enough to offer resistance when he tried to look away again. I looked to the other ponies, seeing if they agreed. They nodded to him in agreement and made moves to start packing things up. That gave me a moment to compose myself and calm my nerves. I looked deep into his wounded eyes and smiled, before giving him a hug around his neck with both of my hooves. The sudden hug caught him off guard, and an expression of shock crossed his face. I leaned up so I could whisper into his ear.
We've got you. You should all relax. We'll get dinner out and keep watches.
Naeruiih had somehow managed a decent vegetable stew, and I served it until every pony had their fill. I wasn't eating myself yet. My gut twisted up too much when I thought about it.
I have to make up for not being there for Buddy.
I found out that many of them were missing caravaneers. Apparently that is what they call traders and merchants in the wasteland. They were captured by the raiders similar to how we had been ambushed. The amount of pain in camp was devastatingly heavy. Talk of the bodies in the shed brought tears to their eyes and cries of painful turmoil when I talked about them. It was like they knew those who had been taken from them were dead, and I just confirmed it. None of them wanted to go inside any of the buildings once they knew about the deaths. Every pony lay down eventually under the stars, either passing out from emotional exhaustion or relief from not being dead or in a cage. I took first watch, but I wasn't spending it watching. With all the strength I could muster, I decided to follow Alguacil's example. I put a blanket from one of the gore-ridden cages over the corpse in the shed. I could barely hold down the few bits of food I had managed from Naeruiih's stew. With strength I never knew I could muster, I dragged it over to where I found the graves. I found myself scanning around with my pip-buck EFS, turning in a circle, looking for any red blips to pop up.
Sunrise, your friends are making you paranoid.
I admonished myself.
But they have proven that being paranoid was a good idea.
That sobering thought kept me checking my EFS after every single shovelful of dirt I lifted. 2 hours later, there were 4 more shallow graves. 1 for the corpse, and 3 for the skeletons I had put together.
I don't want to do this ever again.
You will have to, Sunrise. But the important thing is to never get used to it. If you truly have what it takes to be my friend, you will never get used to it.
Pink stated, and that left me confused. Was Pink just a figment of my imagination? Or was she really a different entity? Something like the spirits that Chifundo talked to that could talk in my head? Something utterly separate from my person? What was that pink fluffy maned pony? Finally, I put the shovel back against the metal building and checked EFS again. I wasn't sure if the shovel was up to the task or if the thing of metal was signaling its final job. But my thoughts were back to this moment. I spun in a full circle and checked every single direction.
Please let this stupid eyes forward sparkle be more reliable than my eyes. Or at least able to keep them safe while I do this.
I dragged a bunch of rocks over Buddy's grave. Then, finally, got the largest one I could move and pinned his hat down at the edge of it. I drew the image from my dreams. The red-orange sunrise over the horizon of a green field. An angel pony holding a shotgun floating just under the cloud. And with the chalk on the rock, I used gunpowder and oil to seal it against the weather.
There. Now at least the world will know you were here.
I said, falling down onto my haunches to stare at the grave marker. I checked my EFS all around one more time. 10 green dots and 1 gray.
Wait, where's that gray one?
It was right on the edge, as it kept winking in and out of my EFS range. Like it wanted me to know whoever it was there, but not be able to see them. It was strange how little a dot of only 20 pixels in your vision could tell you so much. It wasn't the knowledge of the HUD, but some gut instinct I had no idea where I got it from. I tried to jog my memory only to get a shout of pain that forced me to think of the present instead.
Buddy, I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough to face the danger. You prepared me as best you could, and I wasn't ready. It cost you.
Tears and sniffles silenced me for a moment as I drew in a ragged, cursed breath.
Your life.
The tears were rolling down my cheeks like Rainbow Falls water as I forced a word out loud. The tears washed parts of the raider's blood off my face with them.
I don't know why you did it. You barely knew me. But we are friends. And I'm not going to say were, because I still think we are. I hope that one day I can make up for it.
Every word spoken brought more tears. Every bit of pain in me was pouring out. My heart wrenched at the thought that someone had dived for me. I felt like this wasn't even the first time I had experienced somebody sacrificing themselves for me. I couldn't remember it, but I knew this had happened before, and that made it feel worse. I had to finish my thoughts. I had to say something to him.
You barely knew him. For all you knew, he was trying to use you to atone for something he'd done.
Yes, but he was good to you, regardless of anything, Sunrise. Kindness gives kindness.
I didn't care. At the second, choice wasn't mine. My grief wouldn't allow me to care.
Buddy, I promise I will force myself to act next time. If for no other reason than I don't want to ever do this again. Please. Rest now. You've done everything you could for me. And so much more.
I gave another loud sniff and sucked up a few more tears.
I've only known you for 2 days, but I can say you were a good dog.
I took a set of smaller rocks and placed them around the brim of Buddy's hat to hold it down completely and resigned myself to dragging my hooves away.
At the very least, I'll make sure the world knew you were here.
I then checked my EFS again, through the tears I was wiping away. 11 dots lit up at the bottom of the HUD. 10 green and 1 gray, no red. I checked the time on my pitbuck one final time. My shift was over an hour ago, according to the chronometer on the pitbuck.
At least everyone else could get some extra rest on my account.
I gently poked the gray and black zebra. His eyes snapped open.
Yes, I said eyes because I swear there is something behind that eye patch. You can't see it, but you can certainly sense it when Naeruiih looks at you.
He was on his hooves in a split second. I fell onto my flanks and opened my mouth to yelp when Naeruiih's hoof snapped out to keep my lips closed, and he shook his head very slowly from side to side. I followed his other hoof to where he was pointing at the sleeping former slaves.
You'll wake the others. Now get your rest. It's my turn to watch over us.
The zebra stallion coldly whispered in one breath. I nodded through my mouthful of hoof and then started towards my saddlebags before I was stopped by a hoof on my tail. I turned to see Naeruiih holding my tail.
No, the noise will wake up the others. Leave your sleeping bag in there and use mine.
He released me and walked over to the fire, looking like a sentinel pony statue. If it was not for the occasional slow fluffing out of his chest and the flattening to breathe, you would think he was a perfect black and grey zebra statue. I simply curled up in his bedroll and started to drift off to sleep. Sleep wasn't hard and came on quickly. Between emotional and physical exhaustion, I just wanted to be lost to the world for a bit.
Classroom? Where am I? What is this?
I seemed to be in a classroom, but it wasn't one I remembered. The ponies and the surroundings were just off. This room was clean and pristine, sparkling like gemstones. And the teacher sparkled as well, when she closed the door as the bell rang. I looked down to the corner of my vision, and I had red hooves at the desk. Yes, I was a colt.
Well, this is different. Not sure I like how it feels to have a...
My eyes followed back to the front of the room. The mare was a lovely shade of sapphire blue and had an odd reflection about her.
Wait, reflecting light? Like a crystal? Where am I?
I checked my own hooves again out of the corner of my host's eye. They moved to look at a piece of paper. It was a school science test. My hostess' hooves reflected as well, bright and shimmering. They were like crystals now that I got a good look at them, not gemstones.
What is this place? What kind of ponies are these that they reflect light? Was this an orb from the stable? I think so, but where did it come from? How did they get it?
The teacher interrupted my thoughts, and my host sat up straight when the mare started talking. I got a sense her name was Shimmering Lantern from the host.
Good morning, class. Today we will be talking about the Crystal Fair and why we celebrate it.
The mare up front started her lesson.
Now think carefully. What do all of you think is the reason behind the celebration?
She was drawing upon the chalkboard as she spoke when the outside light got dark. Incredibly dark.
What in the world?
I felt a hoof poking my side, and my host chose to ignore it. My host's head turned to the window away from the hoof as the dark clouds gathered around. The daylight completely blacked out by the surrounding clouds, the ground erupting in a dark black crystal, and then another. I felt the fear and horror in my host's mind. The colt I was riding headed for the door out of the classroom, and then...
Sunrise, get up now!
Naeruiih ordered, poking me with a hoof repeatedly. I checked my pitback. Just over an hour had passed.
Naeruiih? It's only been an hour. What?
Listen!
Naeruiih declared, and I heard it. The sound of... insects? No. Yes. Something with many legs, and a carapace moving towards us, chirping loudly. The noise echoed through the building, at a volume that could only be generated by hundreds of bugs. I looked to see all the rescued ponies were still fast asleep, but my companions were already up and moving. The tension was rising as the noise came closer by the seconds. Alguacil took to swings and got onto the nearest building. Chifondo quickly used some overtuned boxes to get on the farmhouse roof. Cautiously, the zebra checked the tiles to make sure they would support him. After a few steps to be certain, he lay down to scope out the shadows with his varmint rifle. He was aiming in the direction Naeruiih pointed. I stepped around the sleeping refugees ponies and took out my shotgun.
Sunrise! EFS!
turn it on now.
I flipped the pitbock and my vision was overrun with red dots along the interface. It was less individual pips and simply one moving mass of something. And there were hundreds of them. I turned over and dashed to Mauve. My hooves were on his side, shaking him awake.
Get up, now! Get everyone up! Nyota, move them anywhere but that way!
I said while pointing a hoof to the open area where we had come through. The panicking stampede of farm ponies drew Alguacil's eye as they thundered past him, squeezing through the building towards the impromptu graveyard. He flew down and landed next to me as I looked up with terrified eyes.
How many is it? What's your EFS say? Are they hostile?
So many! I don't know what it is, but there are a whole lot of them!
I exclaimed and looked back at the dark shapes moving towards the edge of our light. The griffin pulled out several bottles with paper and rags, stopping them up.
Here, you threw the grenade. I think these might do it.
I looked at the bottles and then inhaled their smell. Gasoline. These are Molotrots.
How many of these do you have?
I looked around, starting to formulate a plan and get the pieces in place. My mind started simulating the placement of several Molotrots between the farmhouse and the L building where Buddy died in. I was trying to piece it all together, just right, so that I could get the maximum burn and not destroy the graves.
Over a dozen.
The Grufflaw Griffin was business as usual. I was already darting around planting the Molotrots onto the ground in places to create a burn zone. I stepped into sats and time slowed down for me. This gave me time to think. My eyes analyzing exactly the right spot to put those little infernos in a bottle.
If I place them there between those two buildings, I could protect the graves and put a wall of fire between us and the Horde. I just have to set it up.
Glad to know I gave you the right cutie mark, you little wasteland-style party pony.
Pink exclaimed for a second and then was gone. Again.
Alguacil, get working and move everyone out of here. Corners, you're with me. We have to plant these.
I said, passing the box spawn 3 of the explosive cocktails. I glanced back with my pitbuck light on and could make out a rolling shadow in the darkness beyond the edge of the light. I turned and bolted away from the shadow, leaving it behind. Whatever these chittering creatures were, they could not keep up with a running pony. I kept stuffing the firebombs into the ground alongside of the 2 buildings that we were escaping between. If they wanted us, they would have to go through the route between the farmhouse and the L-shaped building I hadn't gone inside of. All but one of them were placed, and I had gained the distance as well. The red dots on my EFS seems to be constantly pausing and darting around uncoordinated, though they were moving towards us and starting to put up a chase. With some distance between myself and our former camp, I took a moment to wait for these chittering creatures to enter the firelight. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of one of the creatures in the light of our campfire.
Roaches? Are these what roaches look like now? The size of a schoolful!
Ponies galloped past around me, running for the cleared farm fields beyond as I had set the last linchpin to my little fire trap. Deeply focused on the approaching horde, I passed the last Molotrot back to my tail, which somehow knew to hold it upright. Fuse sticking out towards my mouth, my hoof grabbing my lighter from my kitchen kit and lit the fuse. I glanced up at the incoming onslaught of red. What had been off in the darkness minutes before was now practically on top of us. The flickering lights of our campfire reflected off their chitin. I could see them clearly now. Bugs. They were massive roaches, to be exact. All of them were covered in muck, blood, and the decay they thrived in. They were half my size, as big as my shotgun or my saddlebags. It wasn't hard to imagine how 3 of them could rip me to pieces, turning my heart into a cold lump.
Dear goddesses! What are these things? Why are they so huge? Is this what radiation does to them?
Rad roaches.
Alguacil spit towards the Molotov field.
Probably drawn here by the smell of the bodies. Sunrise, wait till they get a little closer and then light.
I was already ahead of him, and it was too late to turn back. My tail hurled the lit firebomb into the air, watching it tumble end over end. The world moved in slow motion with the flickering light of fire, slowly drawn to the ground by gravity, and the exact right spot.
You might only have one match, but you could start an explosion!
The little pink pony in my head sang out as I watched a fireball erupt between us and the rat roaches overrunning the campsite. The chirping screams of rat roaches filled the air. The flames incinerated those caught in the initial blast and created a barrier as they kept trying to scramble over. A wave of heat washed over me, singed the edge of my mane, tail, and even my eyebrows. I stumbled back a few steps from the firestorm. The rat roaches rushed into the flames, trying to get at their cooking comrades, all of them driven by hunger. I took another step back and felt Buddy's head at my hoof. I stopped there.
No! You won't get him! I don't care how many shells I have to waste, this is as far as you get! None of you are going to defile my friend's grave!
I kept my shotgun pointed at the creatures through the firestorm. They hurled themselves at the burning flames that slowly consumed them. A few of them got through the flames, only to fall to the ground just as quickly. They had fought through the fire and brimstone, only to cook inside their own carapace. The rad counter on my paper clicked a few times, but I dismissed it as nothing dangerous. Nothing that would have me back away from defending Buddy's final resting place. Even as I felt a slight tingling on my face between the flames that I knew was magical radiation poisoning me. I didn't care. Buddy was staying safe. The smell was oddly good. It smelled of cooking meat, like I would expect to get from a sand dog tavern or a grindstone.
Dear goddesses. Meat smelled good? I'm a pony!
The roaches couldn't get through the flames, and I soon stopped trying. Instead, they started eating each other as they cooked.
What madness is this? That bugs don't have a sense of self-preservation?
I hung my head, and I felt the tears well up as the screaming of magical radiated mutant bugs saturated the air. I turned around, now that I was certain that the firestorm would keep Buddy's resting place safe, and I bolted away from the fire to catch up. Soon, only my pip-up light was illuminating the world around me. Alguacil landed next to me, and I felt the talon pushing me along by the flanks. I just hoped we had done enough that Buddy's grave would be protected from the ravages of time for a bit longer. I kept trying to take a look back, only to have Alguacil's gaze meet me through the light, telling me to keep looking towards where we were going, and not at the burning horror scene of the roach's assault. Slowly, the flames faded, leaving us in the dead of night, and eventually my pip-up light caught the end of a flank belonging to a pony still moving. Naeruiih was bringing up the rear to ensure none of us was left behind. They had slowed down at some point. I looked back and could make out the barest light against the black night clouds where the farmhouse burned. I traveled for over an hour with my pip-up light still on, before Naeruiih approached me.
Cut that off. If something is out there, they will be able to see us long before we are able to see them.
His tone struck me like a whip, leaving me flinching from his direct order. I reached down and cut off the light, much to the moans and complaints of the free ponies traveling with us.
Naeruiih, is it always this cloudy?
I asked, looking at him once my eyes got used to the darkness. I was hoping to get something out of him besides borderland rage.
The Pegasi above sealed the clouds. When the bombs started falling, they did so to keep us from them and prevent any further megaspells from hitting their cities. Now we on the ground must suffer the eternal cloud cover.
Neota explained with something that sounded like a grudge directly against the Pegasi above. He was clearly mad about it, but then again, he was mad about everything.
Can I ask you why you're so angry all the time?
I asked hesitantly.
And you are not? You woke up to a world devastated, turned into the wasteland that took Buddy and so many others like him. You are a filly that is supposed to be attending school in the pre-war time. Now you're forced to use firebombs to exterminate bugs that would devour you in your sleep.
Neota coldly deflected.
You could just say I don't want to talk about it, not make me feel like I should be upset as well.
Chifundo put a hoof around me and pushed me towards the ponies that were walking behind us.
Surely you do not think it all is bad, Nyota. Look at the ones whom walk with ya.
He began as I looked at them. They were a sad lot. 2 stallions, Mauve included, 3 mares, and 2 fillies. Any colts had been among the skeletons I had buried next to Buddy. The raiders had taken particular glee in torturing them for some reason. None of them walked with their backs straight or head held high. They looked broken, like something inside of them had been shattered. The filly closest to me had a golden brown coat and a soft purple mane that should have been well cared for. Instead, it was ragged. I could see the cuts and scrapes along her flanks and face. Those silver eyes reflecting a pain that I had never experienced. There were stains in her coat that I recognized as something from our Hearts and Hoofs class.
Had they... No. What kind of fucked up thought was that? Raiders weren't that bad, were they?
Sadly, little Sunrise, yes they are. They are some bad ponies. You should remember, raiders are bad ponies.
Damn it, Pink Pony, I didn't ask you!
My eyes drifted up to see Chifundo's face in the dark. It was hard to make out his expression. All I could really see was that it was him, with his bright blue eyes next to pink stripes.
Yeah, but what safe haven are we taking them to? Since I've been awake, I've found ghouls, mole rats, rat roaches, raiders, and killer robots. Not to mention that I'm reasonably sure I've taken just enough radiation to equal a year's supply of Sparkle Cola. No, survival isn't enough.
I felt a bitter taste in my mouth.
Sunrise, you have to know what that bolt did to you.
You've been lucky.
And some of the things that have happened shouldn't have happened. For right now, that is what you live for. You aren't just surviving. You have to find out exactly what happened. Buddy died for that. You can't let it be in vain.
Neota snorted at what I had said. Chifundo looked at him and snorted back mockingly. Neota stamped his hoof on the next step. Chifundo did the same, and then intentionally rolled head over flank like an acrobat back to his hooves. Neota stared at him and growled angrily. Chifundo growled back, only his was playful. All of us had stopped in the dark to stare at the 2 zebras who had lost their minds. That was until I felt a smile curling on my lips, and both of the little fillies burst out into laughter.
Laughter. That was something I missed. Miles and cupcakes were another thing on that list.
The 2 zebras stared at each other as Neota's anger vanished, and Chifundo had a smile that I could see even in the night. The other ponies gave a half-hearted smile and nervous chuckles. Corners was giggling like a school filly, and I felt my heart being lifted.
Now, Sunrise, show them the sunrise!
I heard Pink exclaim, and I felt a great need to bring joy filled my heart. You can only mourn the dead for so long. These ponies needed a reason to live.
What? What are you?
My tail was holding my thermos full of coffee. freshly brewed at dinner and warmed by the fire while we slept. I grabbed it with my hoof and undid the cap, pouring enough to split it as I passed it around to the shattered ponies. Their spirits started to lift. I could see it in their faces, despite the lack of light.
Happiness has its own light, even in the dead of night. Chifundo, I hate and love you so much right now.
Even if I spoke in my own mind with Chifundo's cadence, I kept smiling, enjoying the thought of maybe putting some joy back into them. I looked in my pack. There were cookies from Frida Waffles and 3 sweet cake rolls, little joys straight out of my world before I went into the stables. I took my thermos back, now empty, and handed out the cookies, along with 2 of the sweet cake rolls going to the pair of fillies.
You do remember those have drugs in them, right?
Yes, of course I do. But I can hope that they get a reaction like Buddy got instead of the one I got. If they do, then it'll brighten their smiles even more.
The pink pony in my head nodded and grinned ear to ear as she darted out of my sight, almost like the mare was encouraging the use of drugs. Naeruiih stared at me and then at the sleigh ponies. He put a hoof to his face, and I heard a slightest bit of a chuckle that he was trying to stifle. The golden brown filly walked up to me and shyly scuffed her hoof across the dirt. Not quite making eye contact, the filly was blushing like a school filly with a crush.
My name is Nuka Nugget. I didn't know there were ponies who would be nice to strangers.
Her words were timid, almost like she expected me to lash out and hit her at any second. I moved to hug her neck, and she winced until she felt my hooves around her shoulders and pulled us together, little filly to budding mare.
Of course, Nuka. More ponies should be this way.
I felt her hooves around me in return for my inviting words. She clung tightly as a few tears rolled down her cheeks. I could feel them dotting my neck, sliding into the reinforced plating around my stable-tech barding. I held her close and could feel her soul growing through me at that moment. The fire inside of her was restored, and the hope was brought back to her body. I softly stroked her mane, and the party came to a stop. Alguacil landed among us.
What is the holdup? You need a... Oh.
He paused as he noticed the filly hugging my neck. He took stock of the situation and then looked at Naeruiih. The black-striped zebra had a smile on his face for the first time since I'd known him. The night itself felt brighter and less oppressive as our spirits joined in celebration of just being alive. Alguacil shrugged, and Naeruiih shrugged back at him, as the two exchanged a wary smile. They were both utterly confused at the laughter and suddenly warm spirits, but neither could deny they needed it. I watched the two of them for a while. My mind wanted to ask them both 100 questions, but none of them were appropriate right now.
All right, Nuka. We need to keep moving. We're already tired, and we won't be safe till we get to Silver Fang.
I reminded her, as a red dot popped up on the pip book. It disappeared a few seconds later. As we started moving, I kept looking for that red dot, and sure enough, it came into view every so often. Naeruiih sensed it too, looking with his eye and turning his head in the direction where the pip would appear on the EFS, then looking away as it faded. We got another hour of walking, and the red dot was joined by a second now, from the same direction.
Why didn't some pony think to give EFS any information beyond hostile, friendly, neutral? Seriously, distance, type, species, anything at all? But I doubt anyone could have planned needing a giant cockroach, an undead pony, or a psycho raider setting.
We walked for nearly another 7 hours before Silver Fang came into view. Thankfully, the red dot was just that, fading in and out. Not that it helped our frazzled nerves. Every pony else got 5 hours of sleep, while I had barely nodded off before the swarm came for us. I could see the hairs and feathers of our two one-eyed members' paranoia perking up. Sparrow came out to greet us as we arrived at the gates of Silver Fang's shanty. The Pegasus leader looked at the battered ponies, then back to us, then back to them.
Are you bringing in refugees now? I thought when you left this morning that would be the last we saw of you. What are we supposed to do with them?
Sparrow's murk armor gleamed against the sunrise behind us. It was the one time we could see the sun until it hid behind the clouds. I approached her cautiously and hoped she felt as warm in her heart as I did right now.
Well, they probably want some payback at the raiders that did this to them. You sounded like you could use the recruits. Imagine the PR. Assuming the Wasteland still cares about PR or reputation.
You can play it up around the merchants that stop by. Silverfang Shanty takes in and recruits former raider prisoners. Mercs with a heart.
Alguazil shot all of this to Sparrow, and even went out of his way to imitate a merchant with the last few words about mercs. I tried to look as bright-eyed and chipper as I could, despite my brain screaming,
"Sleep now!"
Sparrow took a few moments to examine me. She could clearly see the bloodstains on my face, helmet, and barding. It seems like she was staring at me for what was an eternity. I wasn't sure what she was studying. Maybe it was the sleepless, bloodshot eyes, the brain and blood smeared all the way down to my collar, or possibly the bushy-tailed smile I gave to try to make it seem like everything was perfectly fine. Her expression shifted to one of a soldier who understood the horrors I had seen.
Do I really look that bad?
She still wasn't speaking, and I thought to break the silence now.
Hi, Sparrow. Good to see you, too.
I broke the silence and kept my smile towards her. A high-pitched, excited squeal of delight came from behind me. The child's squeal made me stumble back and swirled my head to look at its source. Sparrow's gaze swung over past me to the filly next to me. She trotted up to Nuka Nugget, and I looked from the older Pegasus mare back to the smaller filly. I swore they were family somehow, even down to their matching sets of silver eyes. Nuka's lack of wings did not spurn or knock away the feeling the two were somehow related, very close if the impression I felt was right. One wouldn't piece it together looking at them separately, but right next to each other, it just clicked.
Unless this little one has parents here, I'm taking her in,
she declared, and I saw a new look on her face for the first time. Not a look of relief or laughter out of the need to find something to cling to, but genuine hope. It filled Nuka Nugget's eyes, and the hardened murk mask Sparrow always wore slipped away. I never would have guessed her to be the motherly type, but once the facade was down, there was no denying it. No one spoke up. Sparrow took Nuka under her wing and pulled Nuka tight to her flanks, against the black armor with the white fang marks, though they were no longer visible through Nugget. They walked back through the gates with the sun rising up before them on the other side of town. The heartfelt moment was almost perfectly framed by the rush of bright light from the morning sun. It seemed poetic or ordained by fate. Either way, my eyes started from rescued pony to rescued pony. They looked like living ponies now. The spark of magic had returned to their souls.
You gods, show them some quarters, and figure out what roles we need filled by the adults. Also, if the other little one doesn't have a parent among them, get them one.
Sparrow's hardcore merc attitude slipped back into place. Then, with a voice that could shatter metal, she turned her head.
That's an order, you lot!
The gate guards jumped and began checking on the group of bedraggled ponies behind us. I let out a sigh of relief and started to walk through the gate when a blip on my EFS made me stop again. The red dot on my pip-bug kicked up again.
What was that? Had it really shadowed us all night? We were safe inside Silverfang, right? Whatever it was, couldn't get inside it if it intended harm. Right?
Quest perk acquired. Coffee addict. Who knew coffee could be a drug? When you think of something to spark yourself or pick yourself up in the morning, you go right for the black nectar of the goddesses. Your name is Wandering Sunrise, but you're not a morning pony.
But not from how far. Our journey so ruthless, I still bear the scars. And what matters ain't that the world saw its end, but what kind of life we will spend.
I'm trying to be better, but still miss the mark. And each time I save you, I'm left in the dark. No,
when you're in trouble, I'll be by your side. My love for you ain't gonna hide. Inside the fire keeps burning.
Still death is calling. The rivers run dry 'neath a blackened out sky, and all the dead trees are falling. Creatures we face will see equal judgment, our mercy or grace. Decision is needed for those who survive of whether you'll be left alive.
And all bloody work for a hope that we hold of past golden age and its story still told. And what sacred virtues we're able to heed to bring back to those who are in need.